In the 1940s, the legendary Aldo Leopold started talking about something unheard of. He started talking about this thing that he called the land ethic, where the soil, the water, the air, the ecosystem, all the organisms on it are all one community, and that we humans are part of that community. And as part of it, we need to take care of the community. Well, that was something unheard of way back in the 1940s, and it's still something that people struggle with today. Leopold said that we abuse land because we view land as a commodity, not as a community. We need to change our mindset. Fran Hammerstrom said it best when she said we need a community or a population that appreciates natural things for their beauty. And we're not there yet. We need to get to that point. When Teddy Roosevelt was president, he developed the national park system. Yellowstone National Park was our very first park, and I had the pleasure of working in Yellowstone. But for those people who've been following the news, it's painfully obvious that we have not developed a land ethic, just by the horrible way that we've been treating the wildlife that lives in these parks. People are harassing bison, chasing elk, petting moose, petting bear, with no concern about the well-being of the creature. They just think it's kind of cool, and maybe they're macho. I think they're idiots myself. But either way, we haven't developed this healthy respect for the land and its creatures. Unfortunately, most negative interactions at national parks end up with the animal being euthanized. People get carried away when they see interesting animals. Even birders, if they hear about a rare bird, will basically go over in huge groups to watch it. Most of them are ethical, but occasionally you get a person who gets a little bit out of control. All of that shows that we haven't quite developed the land ethic that we need. Not long after the national park system was developed, we also developed the Bureau of Land Management. The government took over hundreds and thousands of acres in an effort to protect habitat and natural resources. The problem is, through the years, we haven't figured out that the U.S. government is not in the business of dictating ethics. People like Clive Bundy had a legitimate complaint when they took over federal buildings in an effort to get the Bureau of Land Management to relinquish state lands, because the Constitution doesn't give the federal government that power. The power belongs to the states. But when the states tried to set up lands and dictate what people should do, people fought that too, because the states can also, they get crazy. They add too many different policies and too many hoops to jump through, and too much red tape, bureaucracy runs rampant. And again, we're trying to dictate ethics. So even at the state level, it's hard to do. The Hammerstroms were instrumental in developing the prairie chicken lands on the Buena Vista Marsh. The monies that they got to purchase the lands was all donated by wealthy investors, and then the land was turned over to the state for management. Even that is frowned upon, because people will say, well, wait a minute, then we pay the state, so we should have a say in what's going on. So there is no easy, clear method running through state agencies or federally. We are entering a period of time that is unprecedented in our lifetime. We're coming up to what scientists are calling the sixth extinction, where they're talking about losing more than half the species of animals that we have on this planet in a very short period of time. Most of the problems are being human-made, human-caused. And by the time we're done, what are we going to have left? Microtus and grasshoppers? There's got to be something that we can do. And most people feel helpless. They're like, well, what can we do? And the oceans are being affected even worse than land. This is a global epidemic that we need to come together, all the countries together, and figure this out before it's too late. Leopold mentioned that the people who have the greatest effect on the land are the farmers, because they own all the land, or most of the land, and they can affect change. Well, I think that's brilliant. The problem is farmers have to struggle to survive. They want to do what's right for the environment, but they have to feed their family first, and they got to take care of themselves, and they got to do their job. But if each one of us does something, whether we're a farmer or a landowner, each one of us can be part of a huge global movement that can affect the world. When thinking of global issues, it's very easy to get overwhelmed. But if each one of us does our part, millions and millions of people doing small things, it adds up. Maybe you can only manage for monarch butterflies. Well, that'll help the monarch butterfly. Maybe a group of people can get together and put together a loosely linked co-op, kind of like hunting clubs, and put together lands to protect and manage for prairie chickens or northern harriers or whatever species you wish to help. It can be done, but each one of us needs to focus on doing a small part. On my property, I dearly love to manage for northern harriers. Northern harriers are the marsh hawks, nest on the ground, and have become threatened in New York State, and their populations are dwindling like crazy. The problem is I have to be realistic, too. I own 38.9 acres, but it's wooded, and it's not the proper habitat for harriers. So I'm going to pick a species that I do have habitat for. So I decided I'm going to try and manage for the northern goshawk, a woodland species that hasn't, to the best of my knowledge, nested on my property. And I'm going to manage for goshawks, and in my lifetime, I'm going to have goshawks nesting on my property. That's my goal. Remember, when you start to get overwhelmed about planning something like this, Leopold lived during the Dust Bowl era, where the topsoil was being blown away. He watched the deforestation of most of North America's forests, and he even watched rivers in Ohio burst into flames. We've changed a lot of things through the years because of Leopold and other people. This is something that we can roll up our sleeves and get to work on, and we can do ourselves. Leopold almost watched the extinction of the American bison. He did watch the extinction of the passenger pigeon and the heath hen. If we don't do anything, how many species are we willing to watch disappear on this planet? Well, I personally don't want to see any species disappear during my lifetime. So I'm willing to make the commitment to develop my property for a particular species. When I say I'm developing my habitat for goshawk, it doesn't mean it's just goshawk. Goshawks are just part of that ecosystem. So the habitat that goshawks live in is also habitat for other creatures. So if I'm working on goshawk, I'm also helping develop my lands for other creatures. It's going to be a large undertaking, but over the next few years, the rest of my life, that's what I'm going to be working on. And I'm going to document it with a series of videos. So come on along, watch the videos, and maybe get inspired to focus on managing for your own species.